It started with a scream. Not the kind that echoes across a playground during recess, but the kind that makes a father's instincts kick in like it's a battlefield. Michael, a retired army sergeant, hadn't even planned on being there that day. His daughter had forgotten her lunch. Simple. He'd drop it off and leave. But as he walked past the playground fence, he froze. A group of boys had cornered a little girl near the monkey bars. One shoved her. Another called her a name. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She just looked at them like she knew something they didn't. And that's when Michael stepped in. "Hey," he barked, his voice still carrying the force of command. The boys scattered instantly. He jumped the fence without thinking. Rules be damned. Teachers ran over, alarmed, not at the boys, but at him. "Sir, you can't be here, especially not like this." But Michael pointed to the girl. They were hurting her. "Where were you?" That's when everything changed. Every kid on that playground went dead silent. Teachers whispered. One ran to the office. And the girl? She stood, brushed off her skirt, and looked up at Michael with the calmest expression he'd ever seen. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," she said, using his last name without hesitation. "I'll take it from here." Michael blinked. "How do you know my name?" But she didn't answer. She simply walked toward the school like she owned it. Other kids stepped aside as she passed. Even a teacher lowered her head. Who was this girl? And why did it feel like she was the one in charge? If you've ever wondered how one act of bravery could unravel a school's biggest secret, buckle in. This story will hit you right in the heart, and you won't see the ending coming. Before we dive in, hit that like button if you believe in standing up for others, even when it's not easy. Comment below, what would you have done in that moment? And if you love real stories with wild twists, subscribe, we've got plenty more where this came from. Now, let me tell you what really happened. Before Michael was a dad in cargo shorts standing in front of a jungle gym, he was Sergeant First Class Michael Carter, infantryman, tactician, leader. 20 years of service. 3 deployments. 1 Purple Heart. He'd seen war zones most people couldn't pronounce. Streets where kids threw rocks at tanks. Nights that never ended. Friends that never came home. But the thing that stuck with him the most wasn't the noise of battle, it was the silence after. The kind that follows loss. The kind that followed him home. After retiring, Michael moved to a quiet town. He picked it for the schools, for the calm, for the promise that maybe, just maybe, his daughter could grow up in a world better than the one he saw. Her name was Emily. And if you asked anyone, she was the light in his life. She had his steel resolve but her mother's warmth, her late mother, who passed away from cancer when Emily was just 5. Raising her alone wasn't easy. Michael approached fatherhood like he approached missions, prepared, disciplined, and always scanning for threats. But school? That was new territory. He wasn't used to the passive-aggressive politics between teachers and parents. The unwritten rules about letting kids work it out. Michael didn't let things work out. He fixed them. When Emily came home crying one day about a boy teasing her for her lunch, he'd wanted to march straight into the cafeteria and teach manners the old-fashioned way. But he held back. He was trying. Therapy had taught him patience. Taught him to pause. Taught him to breathe. Still, he walked Emily to school most mornings, not just to see her off, but to see who she was around. Who looked at her sideways. Who didn't look at all. He volunteered at the school sometimes, always staying on the edges, field trips, parent-teacher nights. He never tried to be the cool dad, just the available one. So when he saw the girl being bullied on the playground, the girl who wasn't Emily, something in him clicked. It wasn't just about protecting his daughter. It was about protecting any child who couldn't defend themselves. His sense of duty hadn't retired when he did. There were still battles worth fighting, only now, they wore backpacks instead of body armor. That's what brought him to that moment on the playground. That's why he jumped the fence. That's why he didn't care about breaking rules. Because once you've carried a bleeding soldier out of a burning building, school policy doesn't exactly rattle you. But what did rattle him was the girl's voice. Calm. Controlled. Familiar, somehow. And the way the other kids reacted to her, like she wasn't one of them. Michael wasn't just watching over his daughter anymore. He was stepping into a story much bigger than he realized. The girl's name was Aria. Michael learned that the next day, when Emily casually mentioned her over breakfast. She's kind of different, Emily said, spooning cereal. Everyone knows her, but nobody knows her. What do you mean? Emily shrugged. She's just not like us. Not like us. That stuck with Michael all morning. He walked Emily to school again, and this time, he watched for Aria. She was there, sitting alone under the tree near the swing set. Reading a book. Not a kid's book. Something thick, probably 2 inches wide. The other kids didn't go near her. One boy started toward her and was pulled back by a friend. Dude, no, the friend whispered. Don't mess with her. It wasn't fear like bullying fear. It was fear like reverence. Michael walked up to a teacher he vaguely knew from drop-off. Hey, what's the deal with that girl, Aria? The teacher's smile froze. Well, she's very bright. Independent. A unique case. Unique how? I really can't say more. The teacher excused herself and walked off quickly. That's when Michael knew something wasn't right. The next few days only made it stranger. He noticed Aria being walked to school, not by parents, but by 2 men in suits. Not flashy, not obvious. But definitely security. One stayed in the car. One stood at the gate until she went inside. Who hires private security for a 3rd grader? Michael tried asking around, parents, staff, even the principal. Everyone clammed up the moment her name came up. It's not our place to talk, one parent muttered. Just let it go. Let it go. He couldn't. Because Aria wasn't just different, she was disconnected. No birthday party invites. No playdates. No online footprint. Even Emily admitted, no one's ever been to her house. But every week, the school newsletter mentioned her, Student of the Month, perfect scores, awards for leadership, organizing cleanup drives, even a local philanthropy project. It didn't add up. Michael's gut told him there was more to this story. So he started watching more closely. He noticed the way teachers looked at her, not like they were teaching her, but like they were managing her. She was allowed to skip lines. No one stopped her from walking into the staff lounge. One morning, he even saw her step into the principal's office without knocking, and walk out 10 minutes later, holding a manila folder. A child carrying school files? That's not normal. Then came the final straw. Michael overheard a conversation between 2 janitors near the parking lot. One muttered, her dad was on campus again this morning. Yeah, the other replied. She brought him in through the back entrance. Same guy who gave that talk to the board last year. Michael stepped closer. Sorry, what talk? The janitors froze. Nothing. Just rumors. You didn't hear it from us. But it was too late. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Aria wasn't just a student. She was something more. And Michael couldn't shake the feeling that this little girl had more power than anyone was willing to admit. And maybe, just maybe, she needed his help more than anyone realized. It happened the following week. Michael had dropped Emily off early. The playground was nearly empty except for a few staff and scattered kids. He stayed parked across the street longer than usual, something about that day felt off. Then he saw it. A black SUV, different from the usual security detail, pulled up along the side lot. Out stepped Aria, holding her backpack tight. But this time, she wasn't alone. A tall man in a designer coat followed behind her, sunglasses still on despite the morning haze. He placed his hand on her back, guiding her toward the rear entrance, not the front gate. But Aria hesitated. She turned, glanced toward the playground, and said something. The man's hand gripped her arm tightly. Too tightly. Michael was out of the car before he knew it. He crossed the street with a soldier's pace, direct, silent, focused. As he neared, he heard the man hissing under his breath, "You don't question me. Not here, not anywhere." Michael didn't hesitate. "Is there a problem?" he asked, voice low but firm. The man turned, caught off guard. "Who are you?" Michael stepped between him and Aria. "I'm someone who knows what it looks like when a kid's scared." Aria didn't speak, but her eyes locked onto Michael's like she'd been waiting for him to show up. "You need to leave," the man said. "This is none of your business." Michael's posture straightened. "The moment you laid hands on her, it became my business." The man smirked, pulling out his phone. "You're going to regret this." Michael reached into his coat, not for a weapon, but for his badge. A small metal card from his service days, with a seal that still carried weight. "So will you." The standoff was short-lived. The man backed off, muttering something about calling the board. Michael turned to Aria. "You okay?" She nodded once. "Thank you." He walked her the rest of the way to the gate, staff watching wide-eyed as they passed. A teacher tried to intervene, but Aria simply raised a hand. "He's with me." They let him through. That moment broke every rule in the school handbook. Parents weren't allowed past the gate without clearance. Physical intervention was strictly forbidden. And yet no one said a word. Not then. But by the afternoon, Michael was summoned to the principal's office. He expected tension. What he got was confusion. "We're in a very delicate position," the principal said, wringing his hands. "Aria's situation is, well, it's complicated." "She's a kid," Michael replied. "A kid being mishandled in plain sight." The principal glanced at the wall, where a certificate with a powerful corporate name hung. "There are financial relationships at play. You wouldn't understand. Try me." The principal leaned in. "Do you know who her father is?" Michael didn't respond. The principal sighed. "He's not just a donor. He owns part of the educational trust that runs this school." Michael let that sink in. This wasn't just about a powerful family. This was about control, money, influence, silence. Aria wasn't protected because she was vulnerable. She was untouchable because she was powerful. But that didn't sit right with Michael. Because no child should have to carry that weight, especially not alone. "She looked afraid," Michael said. "That man, her father." The principal hesitated. "We don't interfere in family matters unless there's a directive." "A directive?" Michael repeated. "She's 8. Not a government asset." The principal's voice dropped. "It's not that simple." Michael stood. "It is. She's a child, and you're all complicit in pretending she's not." He left the office more determined than ever. Later that evening, he looked through old military contacts. Pulled a few strings. Cross-checked corporate records. What he found wasn't illegal, but it was disturbing. Aria's father wasn't just a donor. He sat on the board of 3 private school organizations. His holdings included real estate, education software, and a lobbying firm. And there, buried deep in a document archive, Michael found it, an executive summary naming Aria as primary heir to the trust's next-gen legacy program. In plain English, she wasn't just attending the school. She was expected to one day run it, and maybe the entire network. Which meant she was more than a student. She was a symbol. A future. A tool. And Michael knew, without a doubt, that no child, no matter how special, should grow up like that. Michael wasn't sure what he expected when he asked to meet with Aria after school. He spoke to the principal, said it was a request for closure, for understanding. The principal hesitated, then relented. "She'll decide," he said. "She decides most things here." They met in the library. It was quiet, warm, and lined with books older than some of the teachers. Aria sat at the far table, her tiny frame dwarfed by the high-backed chair. A single folder sat in front of her. "Mr. Carter," she said, looking up. "Thank you for coming." Michael took the seat across from her. "Aria. I'm here because I care what happens to you." "I know," she replied simply. There was no fear in her voice. No confusion. Just clarity beyond her years. "You shouldn't have to deal with what I saw the other morning," Michael said. "No kid should." Aria opened the folder. Inside were printed reports, projected earnings, partnership summaries, even private board memos. She slid them toward him like she'd done this 100 times. "This is what I am," she said. "Not just who I am." Michael scanned the papers. It was real. Her name was on nearly every page. Listed as a protected beneficiary, a legacy controller. Corporate jargon for something terrifying. "They've turned you into an investment," he muttered. Aria nodded. "Since I was born." Michael leaned back. "But why?" "My mother was a visionary," Aria said. "She built the trust. Before she passed, she set it up so I would inherit it, not just the money, but the direction. So your father was never meant to be involved. But when she died, he saw an opportunity. Now he speaks for me, but he doesn't speak as me." Michael clenched his jaw. "And the school?" She gestured around them. "This is my sandbox. They do what he says because he signs the checks. But everything, still legally belongs to me. Once I turn 12, the contracts shift. Full control." 12? Michael echoed. "That's 2 years away." Aria gave the faintest smile. "That's why he's scared. That's why he keeps me quiet." Michael took a long breath. He looked at this child and saw something both extraordinary and heartbreaking. A life that had been scripted before she ever spoke her first word. "What do you want, Aria?" he asked. The room went still. She looked at him, not like a child, but like a CEO weighing options. "I want someone to see me," she said. "Not the legacy. Not the money. Not the silence. Me." And in that moment, Michael understood everything. This wasn't about business. It wasn't about politics or even school policy. It was about a little girl, buried under power she never asked for, doing her best to breathe. "I'll help you," he said. "I know," she whispered. From that day on, things started to shift. Michael didn't back off. He leaned in. He started attending every board meeting, publicly. Sat in on open council votes. Raised questions no one else dared to ask. When her father tried to remove Michael's daughter from the school as retaliation, Aria shut it down with one email. "My school. My rules," she wrote. "And the staff? They changed too. They started treating Aria less like an untouchable, and more like a student. Slowly. Carefully. Respectfully. She started sitting with kids at lunch. Playing at recess. Smiling. For the first time since Michael had met her, Aria looked free. But power doesn't disappear quietly. Behind the scenes, her father began pulling strings, legal, financial, political. Michael didn't flinch. He'd faced worse. But this time, he wasn't alone. Because Aria wasn't just a little girl anymore. She was a leader. And leaders, real ones, don't rise by force. They rise when someone finally listens. And in Michael, she found someone who not only listened, but acted. They formed a quiet alliance. He offered protection, mentorship, guidance. She offered insight, courage, and vision. Together, they navigated a world far too complex for most adults, let alone a child. But Aria wasn't most children. She was the future of something bigger. And Michael would make sure she arrived there on her terms. The changes didn't happen overnight. But slowly, steadily, the school began to feel different. Michael noticed it in the little things. Aria laughing at recess instead of reading alone. Teachers asking for her opinion instead of avoiding her gaze. Students waving at her in the hallway, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. She was becoming visible, not as a name on a board or a beneficiary in a legal document, but as a person. And Michael? He was finally starting to breathe again too. He hadn't realized how tightly he'd been wound, how much of his life was still lived like he was on deployment. Watching. Reacting. Preparing for conflict. But Aria brought something out in him, a different kind of duty. Not to command or protect, but to nurture. To witness. To stand beside. One afternoon, after school, Aria and Emily were sitting under the old oak tree by the playground. Michael approached slowly, listening to their conversation. And he still thinks he can tell me what to do, Aria said, frustrated. Emily giggled. My dad says if someone treats you like property, they don't deserve your time. Your dad's smart, Aria said with a small smile. Michael smiled too, but stayed back. Let them talk. Eventually, Aria looked over. You can come sit, you know. He did. They talked for a while, about books, school, music. Normal stuff. Then Aria asked, quietly, do you think I'll ever be just a kid? Michael took a breath. No, he said honestly. But I think you'll be something better. Someone who remembers what it means to be one, and fights to give that to others. She looked at him for a long moment. Then nodded. Later that week, they started a new routine. Michael and Aria would walk the school grounds after hours. They talked about the future. About leadership. About what kind of school she wanted this to be. A place where no one gets left out, she said. Where power doesn't mean silence. Michael nodded. Then that's what we'll build. That weekend, Michael received a letter in the mail. Handwritten. From Aria. Inside was a single sentence, thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. Underneath, she'd drawn a small version of the school, with her and Emily on one side. And Michael, standing between them and a shadow, on the other. He kept it. Framed it. Not because it made him feel like a hero, but because it reminded him that strength wasn't always about force. Sometimes, it was about showing up. Sometimes, it was about being the quiet voice that says, you don't have to do this alone. And for the first time in years, Michael felt like he wasn't just surviving. He was living. And in helping a young girl find her voice, he'd rediscovered his own. Sometimes, heroes don't wear uniforms. They wear worn-out sneakers, carry forgotten lunches, and show up when no one else does. Michael thought his days of protecting others ended with his service. But life had other plans. He didn't just defend a child, he helped her find the courage to lead. And Aria? She wasn't just a girl who owned the school. She was a reminder that even the youngest voices can carry the most power, if someone's willing to listen. This story isn't just about privilege or politics or even parenting. It's about the power of presence. The difference it makes when someone shows up, stands firm, and says, this matters. You matter. So if you've ever wondered whether one person can change someone's life, they absolutely can. Michael did. And maybe, so can you. If this story moved you, hit that like button, it truly helps others discover it. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Michael's shoes? Or Aria's? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories that remind us what humanity is all about. Thanks for watching, and remember, your voice matters more than you think.